You're welcome back. Now, 26-year-old Agbelempe branch manager of Marwako restaurant, Jihad Chaban, who is accused of assaulting Evelyn Boache, a caterer at the restaurant, has been granted bail of 20,000 cedis with two sureties by the Abeka District Court. Jihad is accused of thrusting the face of the caterer into blended pepper. Lawyers for Jihad, who have pleaded not guilty to the charge, argued that he was entitled to bail since investigation has been concluded. Let's get on to the phone lines now and speak to Joe News Court correspondent Joseph Akablay for more. Hello, Joseph. What more can you tell us about what transpired in court today?
Well, so Bennett, it was pretty interesting in court today in the sense that the complainant in this matter, Evelyn Boache, appeared before the court and gave her testimony. But very interestingly, one thing that she did was to reenact the entire incident that took place. She actually came into the courtroom with the blender in question. This is the blender where the allegation is that she had her face thrusted into the pepper in that particular blender. Once she was blending the pepper, she had to reenact the entire event that took place. Now, after giving her testimony, in fact, lawyers for the accused person, Jihad Saban, had two questions for her and was some clarifications in her narration as to whether she had any contact with management after the said incident. Right after that, the lawyer then put in a request for bail. You recall at the previous session, they made a request for a bail, but that was not granted by Judge Victoria Gans. And her point then was that it was for the security of Jihad Saban. They felt he should be kept in custody. Then again, since investigation was still ongoing, it was important that they held on to the matter and waited a bit before they allowed him go. But this time around, the lawyers argued that, the investigation had concluded and they had heard from the lady, so there was no reason keeping the accused in custody, for which reason the judge agreed and decided to grant her bail.
All right, Joseph, so you witnessed that reenactment. Did it look like it was possible for her face to have been, pushed into that blender?
In fact, Benny, it's an interesting question, and it's one issue that has generated interest and comments on social media. In fact, the point really is that a blender that was brought into the courtroom was a blender of the actual incident. It's quite a big blender, and when she reenacted it, her face, her eyes, her nose, her mouth went into the blender. Actually, it was just the chin and size of her cheek that couldn't go into the blender. The point she made was that those were the only parts that were not dipped into it, and those parts were not affected by the pepper. But in terms of her eyes, her nose, and her lips, as well as demonstrated in court, all went into the blender.
Well, we've had hints that her lawyers are looking forward to pursuing a civil case. What can you say about that?
Human rights activist Francis Xavier Sosu showed up interestingly in court, and he told the court that he was watching criminal brief on behalf of the complainant in this case, Evelyn Boache, and his point is that he has her instructions to monitor proceedings, and if they are of the opinion that they are not happy about how the case is being handled by the state, this is assault and this is just misdemeanor that is being handled at that court, they could proceed to take the matter up to a higher court. So that is what they are considering. I tried to push him to find out whether they'll be doing that immediately or they will hold on for this one to elapse. He said they may decide any time at any point. It doesn't matter whether this matter has ended or not. If they feel things are not going as they expect, they will take it up because it's a very important human rights issue and it's of concern to them.
Well, so how have lawyers of Jihad Chaban been reacting to this development?
I engaged Julio de Medeiros. He led the legal team today. Last week, Augustine Asafoye led the team, and he was very excited. He says they've heard the side of the story from Evelyn Boache. They are prepared to ask further questions. It was because they had other engagement. That's why they asked only 2 questions today. But they'll be coming with a myriad of questions they'll be putting forward to where they'll be expecting responses, after which they will also call upon the accused person and also hear from him as well to tell the side of the story. So essentially, they were very happy about this decision that has come in.
All right, just a curious one there. Are they still holding on to their argument after the reenactment that it's quite impossible for her face to have been dipped into a blender?
They are very clear in their mind. They are very clear in their mind about the innocence of the said person. The point they are making is that they are of the view that there was a splash and it couldn't have been intentional. The last time I spoke to the lawyer, that was the emphasis the lawyer made. It could not have been intentional. And that is the story they are sticking to. They are pleaded not guilty to all the 3 counts. And they say they'll be providing evidence to the courts to prove just that particular claim as well.
Thank you very much, Joseph Akablay, my colleague, bringing us some updates on that particular case involving a manager at the Marwako, a Agbelempe branch of the Marwako restaurant, and a caterer. Now, let's move away from that. A professor of law, H. Kwesi Prempeh, has justified the need for the Akufo-Addo government to create an independent office for a special prosecutor to fight corruption. He argues that the current institutions tasked to fight corruption are not focused because they are mandated bodies who deal with other issues, and thus they usually relegates the fight of corruption to the background. Mr. Prempeh added that the Office of the Special Prosecutor could serve as the institution that deals with investigations carried out by the Commission on Human Rights and Administrative Justice and other institutions originally mandated to fight corruption. Professor Kwesi Prempeh was speaking at the Accra Dialogue organized by the Institute of Law and Public Affairs at GIMPA on the topic Combating Corruption, the Architecture of the Office of the Special Prosecutor.
We're not fighting corruption out of a lack of a political will. We're not fighting it because we have not created the necessary protocols and traditions around the AG's office. But if we begin now to do that, in future we will have more credibility with this office. And then if they are independent or not, the public will tell us.
That's going to be my next question. How independent would the OSP be, and who would it be reporting to?
It has to, logically has to report to the AG, right? I mean, the AG is the one that the Constitution has endowed with the entirety of the power. So if you want to carve something out, at least in terms of a reporting obligation, the AG also has an obligation to Parliament, to the public. So this person must report to the AG about how that power is used.
Wouldn't that be a duplication of duties?
Why? I mean, normally the AG doesn't routinely go to court to prosecute cases, right? This person is not somebody we have elected. It's an appointed office holder.
By the president?
Not by the president. Who says by the president? I mean, the president doesn't have prosecutorial power, so the president cannot give prosecutorial power. Only the person who has prosecutorial power can give it, which is the AG. So in my view of things, the AG has to have a major role in choosing this person, not the president. The president can appoint as in just commissioning the person to start work, but not the choice of the president in a way in which I see it. That would raise problems, at least perceptions about independence, and it may also not be constitutional, I think.
But a senior lecturer at the University of Ghana Faculty of Law, Dr. Raymond Tuguba, disagrees. He says if the country ends corruption, a lot more Ghanaians will starve to death. Dr. Tuguba added, quote, "Our facing corruption without understanding the political economy of corruption is a dangerous thing to do," unquote.
I just returned from Nigeria, and everybody in Nigeria is chanting, "Bring back corruption." You know why? Because addressing corruption without understanding the political economy of corruption is dangerous. Very, very dangerous. Buhari and those who guarded him on did a very, very suboptimal theorization of corruption in Nigeria. And the practical, down-to-earth of the critical role of corruption in keeping the scope, structure, and success of the Nigerian economy in the near term. If you eliminate corruption in Nigeria or Ghana today, many will starve. And in Nigeria, people are dying of starvation now. The only way to avoid this is to find a social safety net for those who depend on corruption on the secondary and tertiary levels for survival, and implement that simultaneously with the crackdown on corruption. So on social media now, Buhari means brought unnecessary hardship among reasonable individuals. That's Buhari. The situation is really serious. We're laughing, but it is serious. So done unintelligently, the fight against corruption can bring a strong economy to its needs and to the IMF.
The director at Center for Aging Studies, Professor Charles Cole, is calling for more public education on aging and pension. According to him, pension is an important phase of human life, and neglecting it to the background could be dangerous. He was speaking at a dialogue on retirement at 60, a curse or a blessing.
Professor Charles Cole spoke in an interview on the sidelines of a dialogue held in Accra on the theme, Retirement at 60, a Blessing or a Curse.
we have to engage. A dialogue series like this is very important, but we need to hold more public debate, public discourse, invite the public involved. Academia cannot do this alone. In fact, we need the public, the society in general, to understand by inviting them to engage in our discussions. I mean, it was very interesting that we had a number of people today, but we can't do this one-off.
A lecturer at the Center for Social Policy Studies at the University of Ghana, Professor Ellen Bote-Doku-Aite, called for measures to be put in place to harness the wealth of experience of retirees.
In middle-income countries and industrialized countries, they find ways of continuing to utilize the expertise of persons who have worked for over 20 years, 30 years, by arranging for them to interact with younger colleagues, either through formal work arrangements or through various professional associations, so that whatever experience they have accumulated over this period can be shared with younger colleagues, particularly in a situation like ours where only about, 13 to 15% of our workforce has secondary school education or higher, which is very low.
She also proposed an increase in the retirement age in some peculiar sectors of the economy.
It's a shame that when people retire, they often don't have any meaningful work to do. And even worse is that they don't get a chance to interact professionally with people who are still working in their field. So this is something that we think is very important for the country to think about. One may consider raising the retirement age in certain sectors of the economy. It doesn't have to be across board. In some areas, you need to retain retired people longer because of the nature of their work. In such situations, you could really benefit from just harvesting that wealth of knowledge, and letting it benefit the economy on the whole, but also benefit the mentoring process that we need to do in our economy.
The managing director of Aluworks Limited, Mr. Kwesi Okun, encouraged citizens to plan towards their pension while in active service.
The retirement 60, because it's arbitrary, says that you're working hard, you are in your prime of life, you reach 60 and you have to go. Okay? That robs the country, because some people who retire at 60 then become farmers or they become anything. They go home and go and sleep. It robs the country. But as I tried to get people to think with the presentation I made, if you regenerate yourself before the age 60, so by the time you reach 60, you're already moving to do something else, then the country does not get robbed because you're using the skills. A lot of people get a surprise when they reach 60. They shouldn't. When they reach age 40, they should start thinking, 60 is 20 years away. What do I do so that when I reach 60, I'm already doing something else?
Mr. Kwesi Okun, however, said an increase in pension age should not be a wishful thinking.
It depends on the calculations. I don't know the calculations. If the requirement to pay pensions is sufficient, then it can stay where it is. If, however, Senate comes and says, I'm running out of money to pay all the pensions, then it'll have to go up so that more people will be contributing. And then, that means less people would have retired and they'll be taking their pensions. So it's a calculation that has to be done by the actuarists. It's not a wish. This is not something you just legislate. You have to do the work and understand where we ought to be.
It's now time for business here on Joy News Today. Emmanuel Abuache will join us right after this.